everyone, welcome back to the Earthdawn Survival Guide, a podcast for all disciplines, paths, players, game masters, enthusiasts, and fans. I am, of course, Dan. With me, of course, is Josh.
Hello, everybody.
And on today's podcast, we will be discussing all things magical, mechanical, and Lakota, because we are going to talk about our final discipline out of the player's guide, the Scout.
Yes.
And I would love to hear anybody's thoughts on this. We just did 2 whole back-to-back podcasts on emails alone, so by all means, we'll tell everybody the email address and you can get a hold of us yourselves.
edsgpodcast@gmail.com.
Absolutely.
We do email episodes about every 2 or 3 episodes, depending on how many we've had. The last couple we did a bunch, mainly because we had gotten a bunch of email, but also because we had been having some technical difficulties and my job was crazy. And so it was a lot easier to just answer emails and talk about those rather than what we will be talking about the next couple of episodes, which would require a little bit more focus on my part, which I am able to contribute today in our recording session.
And we love that. So I found before we even get into the player's guide, I found a lovely little tiny essay written by a man named Dakota Wind, who is of the Lakota tribe of the Native Americans. And he has this little essay called The Spy and the Wolf. I'm not going to read you the entire thing. That would take too long. But I think parts of this fit specifically within the Earthdawn framework. Josh, correct me if I'm wrong. So here's what I came up with. Here's what I found that I'm going to parse to you. Second paragraph, the other kind of scout served the native people by going out ahead of the main camp and watching for enemies, guiding the camp to the best campsites, and searched for game. The essential qualifications of the scout included truthfulness, courage, intuition, and a thorough knowledge of the landscape. The scouts were told to be wise as well as brave, to not look only to the front but behind, up as well as much to the ground, to watch for movement among the animals, to listen to the wind, to be mindful when crossing streams, to not disturb any animals, and to swiftly return to the people with any information. Lakota scouts weren't selected for their fighting prowess, nor were they necessarily warriors. The scout party was selected for each man's keen eyesight and a man's reputation for shrewd cunning and quick vigilance. Before starting out, the scouts' relatives, this is not the Earthdawn part, or the camp's medicine people offered prayers of protection for the sun and moon to light the way, for the rain to fall sparingly, for the rivers and streams to offer safe passage, for the bluffs to offer unimpeded views, and for gentle winds. All of nature is petitioned to assist the scout to the people's benefit. When the scout sets out, only 2 were permitted to go in the same direction. A larger scout party could see and report no more information than 2. A larger party would certainly be discovered more easily by the enemy. The Dakota scout would take with him a small mirror or field glass, invaluable tools made available in the early fur trade days. A scout would signal with his mirror a predetermined set of flashes for the main camp to interpret and prepare long before his return. A tremulous series of flashes might indicate that the enemy was seen. As the scout approached the main camp, near enough for vocal communication, he might let loose a wolf howl, again to indicate that the enemy was seen and or was approaching. So, in Lakota, the Native American language, the word for scout is tonwea, which means spy, guide, or scout. The Lakota scout sometimes employed a wolf headdress to aid in his mission. Sometimes they even carried a bone whistle to aid in alerting the camp. I thought the bone whistle was a really cool thing for maybe adding an Earthdawn flair. So in English, the word spy implies a clandestine secrecy, a guide leads people in unfamiliar territory, and a scout might mean learning basic survival skills or a covert military reconnaissance. But for the Lakota, tonwea clearly meant spying and reconnoitering for the camp. They already know their own country, and all, except the smallest, certainly knew basic survival skills, so they definitely needed to know who else traveled in their territory. I found most of that really in sync with...
That's good stuff.
That was good stuff!
That is good stuff.
By Dakota Wind, thank you. You'll probably never hear this podcast, but I don't care.
Did you find that online?
I did find that online. I can send you the link. We can put it in the show notes.
Send me the link. I'll put it in the show notes.
Fantastic. It's fantastic.
So people can read the whole thing if they want. But yeah, I really like that. That's
half of that goes into what the scouts actually did as far as the U.S. military was concerned, but that's part of a larger organization. I figure as a scout in a smaller adventuring party, like we're doing in the game, just for their own tribe would be an awesome thing to present to people. So I was really impressed with that. And I said, okay, I'm not going to add the word for AL. Today we're doing all things Lakota. That was just too cool for me.
That's cool. So, thank you for bringing that.
Absolutely. I try to add a little flair to the discussions about our disciplines every once in a while. I have no idea what I'm going to do with the gauntlet, so that's just, yeah. Anyway, on to the scout. In the player's guide, it says the scouts are the vanguard, the tracker, the brave rangers who go where others cannot. Scouts are masters of becoming one with their environment, whether that environment is a primeval forest or the heart of the city. So this deals more with what they can do in the city as well, but I think the original essay, as far as reconnoitering and coming back and giving information, is exactly how I've played my scout. I played him a couple days ago, that my guy is first in, reconnaissance, reconnoiter, get back out. Occasionally that means picking locks and going where I should not go, but where I need to go. So that's kind of how I play my scout. Thoughts, since I've done most of the talking for the last 5 minutes?
That's fine. If you were talking about the essay in the original Adept's Way, it also talks about the urban scout, which is sometimes seen as the spy. And I don't remember whether it was in that essay or some other piece somewhere that basically told the story of someone who was looking to hire a scout and was sitting around and waiting, like the scout was apparently late for the appointment, and he was getting frustrated, and the servants that were in the rooms with him were like reflecting his attitude and being very like kind of, oh, master's getting upset and whatnot. And then one of the servants steps forward and says, oh, by the way, I'm the scout that was here, and this was basically like his demonstration of his ability, and he was hired on the spot. Because one of the things that's presented in that essay for the scout is part of the way that the scout magic works is for them to be at one with their environment, whatever that environment might be. Whether, a lot of people consider the scout traditionally to be a creature of the wilds, in a sense, the, places outside civilization in the cities, but that magic, that philosophy of fitting in wherever you are can apply just as well to a city or some other, social situation where they can basically fit in wherever, which can make them excellent spies and agents and things like that.
Yeah, because they will have a couple of talents that kind of overlap with the thief. And I know once upon a time there was a spy discipline laid out in one of the Earthdawn journals, but that's neither here nor there. So we're going with official 4th edition. That's what we're going with tonight. So anyway.
Scouts are, to get it out of the way, scouts are great.
I was going to run a timer on how long it would take Josh to say so. But anyway, 8 minutes in, we're good. And I got no problem with that because scouts are great. I am playing one. I am playing a Tiskrang scout. It's one of the very few times I've written a character history for my guy. It's about 880 words. I liked it. I sent it to my game master. So I love my idea for my scout. So he's kind of cool. Anyway, the important attributes for the scout are dexterity and perception. And I would feign to say perception's more important, but it's listed second because it's alphabetical.
Yes. Dexterity is important in much the same way that it's important for thieves, in that a lot of the things that a scout would be doing in order to survive and navigate the environment often rely on dexterity, climbing, stealth, things like that.
Yes.
But perception is also important because they need to be able to notice the environment, to pay attention to the things around them in order to take advantage of that. So those two neck and neck in terms of importance for the scout.
Agreed. They are building my character to 4th or almost 5th circle now. Yeah, I've relied on those a heck of a lot. So the karma ritual I find is interesting because it does rely on other people, because technically as a scout, you're almost always looking out for either wildlife or other name givers in any way, shape, or form, because your companions have to leave you blindfolded somewhere else and you have to find your way back. So yeah. I found that kind of cool.
Part of that is the awareness, the scout's ability to rely on more than just their sight in order to be aware of their environment and what's going on in it, to rely on other senses, hearing, smell, touch, even taste, although that's closely aligned with smell, and just being aware of that and being able to navigate and be one with the environment so that you can travel from place to place without relying on sight, which is something that, as people, we tend to be very over-reliant on sight, those of us who are fortunate enough to have it.
Yeah, fair enough. So onto the artisan skill recommendations. Listed are rune carving and wood carving, My character, not that I'm talking every night about my character, but actually does sand painting because I based him on Native American or tradition of sand, of using different colored sand to actually make different murals because I thought it was kind of cool to do. Anyway, my thief does the same thing. It's very fun. But yeah, rune carving and wood carving.
The rune carving and the wood carving related in some ways to like blazing trails. If you are setting out to go from point A to point B or to chart the course for other people to follow, if you're the scout, if you're the vanguard, marking the path and the way that people would be going, having symbols or marks that would indicate hazards and things like that. To sidestep here, one thing perhaps to look into if you're looking to develop perhaps a culture of scouts or the symbology that they might use is to look into the old hobo codes, which aren't really, stuff from back in the 19th century, the late 19th century, the early industrial revolution and rail lines and people traveling on those and the marks and symbols that would be used to communicate between the hobos to indicate whether places were safe. Similar codes were used and devised, of course, with the Underground Railroad and any kind of situation where you would potentially be navigating in dangerous territory, whether that's because of the people that are around or environmental hazards or anything like that. So coming up with symbology and stuff like that to use for your scouts is a little bit of flavor that you might be able to add. Nice
Deep pull there, Josh.
Thank you.
Love that. So the half magic ability, scouts may use half magic to recognize tracks and trails left by different types of animals and name givers, know about the plants and creatures native to a region, and even general information on different cultures across bar save. So I've found that very earth-centric and tracking, lovely, knowing your nature, knowing your surroundings, knowing your landscape.
Yeah, there is a very strong sense of, to pull our pop culture references here, Aragorn / Strider from Lord of the Rings, at least in his early parts of the books where he is the Ranger of the North.
Mm-hmm.
That is Scout through and through, the things that he demonstrates in that the awareness of the plants and guiding the hobbits from Bree to Rivendell eventually, and the things that he does to try and navigate the hazards and difficulties along that path.
Mm-hmm.
That's a big aspect of it.
Yeah.
Rangers in general to take, Scout is kind of like a ranger to pull the D&D parallel there.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of their strong connection with the wilds and the environment and animals, and having that knowledge and lore of plants and animals and so forth in order to be able to survive. Although the ranger has tends to be focused a lot more on the wilderness aspect, whereas the scout could equally be at home in the city.
Mm-hmm.
And just having a general knowledge, like the scout is the one that would know about the various tribes and the migration patterns of the nomadic orcs in this particular area, and all of that really cool stuff that you see where, a hunter or something like that pull another one. In the first book, at least in Hunger Games, the main character, the focal character, that is a scout, or could very easily be interpreted as a scout, because of her ability to track and hunt and things like that.
And forage. Yeah, anytime you see anybody in a movie or TV show who has to either track, hunt, fish, forage, things like that, you're looking at what a scout is primarily suited for in Earthdawn. Love it. We'll skip down because scouts actually do get a free talent, and that is navigation, and that is fantastic, and so in their wheelhouse. So good on you.
The ability to be able to know where you're going, how to get there, follow maps and charts and the stars.
Star patterns, yeah.
Yeah. All of that sort of stuff to allow you to get from point A to point B over land or whatever in order to get to where you need to go without getting lost.
Yes.
Incredibly important, and perhaps overall a very definitive ability for the scout, and absolutely makes sense that it's a free talent increasing as they gain in circle and they become more proficient at it as they get better and better in the pursuit of their path.
So they've only got a durability of 5 because they are a specialist.
They are a specialist. The scout, as we'll see when we start getting into their talent selections, does have some combat ability, but is not a frontline combatant. They are not typically going to be dishing out the significant damage that you might get from a warrior or a swordmaster, though they do have some talents that they can pick up that share with them. Swordmaster more than warrior, because they do tend to rely more on the nimbleness and not getting hit as opposed to just being a tank of sorts.
Yeah.
Archer, also, they share a little bit in common with Archer if you choose to go with a more ranged weapon path. But the scout is not they can fight. They absolutely can. They would need to in order to be able to survive in the wild. But they are not a high damage combat discipline. You can build them to sort of be that way, but you're going to end up in a similar situation to what you have with regards to the thief, which is to say that they will be able to do decent damage in certain circumstances, but you're not going to see the long-term, really high output that you would get from more traditional combat-focused disciplines.
They're fun. They can help, but don't expect them to be the heavy. So, anyway, beginning at first circle, Adept may spend a karma point on tests made to find something.
Yes, this is specifically when they are searching for something, like when they are intentionally looking for something. I'm going to be checking the area around the ransacked village for tracks to see if I can find where the attackers came from or went to. I probably would not apply this to just general, like, okay, you're walking down, make an awareness test. This is something where the scout would be deliberately searching for something, which would be primarily with awareness, but where they have a specific goal, something specific that they are looking for, as opposed to just, whenever I want you to see if you notice something, you get to spend extra karma. I don't know that I would go that far with it.
Fair. No, I've used this a couple of times to notice a hidden door in a room where somebody was kidnapped from, and I'm like, well, they couldn't have gone past because I was in the room next door, so I had to find the hidden door. So I'm specifically looking for the hidden door, trap door, or side door, whatever the case may be. You can use karma on stuff like that. So, discipline talents, beginning with, naturally and alphabetically, awareness, because it's incredibly useful for the scout. You're going to rely on this more than anything else.
The scout is the one that notices things. The scout is the one that goes out ahead and is looking for safety to navigate past hazards. The scout is the one scouting or looking or searching. It is absolutely necessary for them as a discipline to have this right there, right at the beginning.
Oh yeah. And then climbing, because occasionally you're going to want to climb trees.
Yep, climb trees, climb bird's
eye view,
climb mountains, climb cliffs, climb stuff to get around hazards or things like that. Again, if you're thinking of the scout in the kind of ranger tradition, being able to climb is again one of those abilities that makes a lot of sense for them.
Incredibly useful. And then of course, thread weaving, scout weaving. So we've talked about weaving enough. Tracking, which again is
another
built on
iconic scout type talent, the ability to follow tracks to see where they go, whether you are in pursuit of someone or any other circumstance along those lines.
Yeah.
Absolutely makes sense for them.
And the tracking in 4th edition, I have read a number of times, and is fantastic because it lets you just this soft blue glow of somebody's tracks, and you can follow them for a certain number of hours up to your tracking rank. So yeah,
that is unchanged from 1st edition. The magical glow, the ability, if you find a single physical track of your quarry and you touch it and you successfully use the talent, then you can see where they've gone, even without necessarily being able to see the actual physical tracks. That magical trail kind of leads you on there. If anybody has played Horizon Zero Dawn, which is a fantastic game, and the main character in that is a scout, basically, she has a little device that basically allows her to magically follow trails in a similar kind of way.
Nice. Very cool.
And it's got robot dinosaurs.
What's not to love about robot dinosaurs?
Nothing.
Lastly, and the discipline talents at first circle is wilderness survival, which again, I think Dakota Wind's essay covered magnificently.
The ability to find food, water, and shelter when out in the wilds. There is a lot in the scout's kit that that does kind of lean more towards the wilderness avenue. And wilderness survival, you also kind of see a lot of overlap here with the Beastmaster in terms of some of the stuff they have, where also is kind of a wild places oriented discipline.
Yeah.
Beastmaster likewise gets access to wilderness survival and tracking and climbing and things like that.
Yeah,
so there is a lot of similarity, but the philosophies and the goals of them are very different. And one of those things that you can use to play up character differences.
Not all. I mean, there's nothing to argue with at first circle for a scout. Those are the core being of what a scout should.
Yeah, I mean, if you are going to be like, well, let's create a discipline that is basically like the ranger. What are the things that they're going to need to do? There is nothing in there that seems strange or out of place or anything like that.
Those are generalized universal talents across a multiple of disciplines, but these are core to the scout. So on to second circle, they get a +1 to their physical defense because they got to get something. And the discipline talent, of course, stealthy stride.
Yes, because stealth and sneakiness, the ability to move unnoticed when necessary, is something that is likewise a hallmark for the scout, and at this point starts to shade a little bit into the same territory as the thief, but again, a very different philosophy about where they're doing it. Leave naught but footprints in terms of the idea of going unnoticed, but it can also be very handy for an urban scout. If you're being a more of a spy or agent in that avenue, you can very easily see stealthy stride coming in handy for that.
Yeah. Easier to be quiet in a city than it is in the forest when you have like dead branches and dry leaves to crawl over. Anyway, third circle. The scout may now spend a point of karma on initiative tests.
There is a little bit of a theme in terms of the scout and in its popular conception of speed and reaction and so forth. Mm-hmm. They don't get a lot of discipline talents that allow them to enhance their initiative, so the ability to spend karma on initiative tests does allow them to kind of play into that theme a little bit. They do have some options that allow them to enhance their initiative if they are going in a little bit more of a combat route, but the early access to karma on initiative does mean that they will be acting more quickly, they will have those reactions and so forth that most people would consider the hallmark of that archetype.
True. And to go along with tracking at first circle, at third circle, the discipline talent is Mystic Pursuit. Mystic
Pursuit is, as we had discussed with the archer, and the wizard also gets access to it, but it's basically what used to be called direction arrow. It is something that is a little bit more powerful and focused than mere tracking. With Mystic Pursuit, you can actually follow a target without necessarily needing to find tracks, which can come in handy. Basically, as long as you have some kind of connection there with you to the thing that you are looking to find, and it is within range, then conceivably you can use that Mystic Pursuit to find your way to it.
Yeah, since my character is a Tiskrang, my Mystic Pursuit presents itself as a small little babbling brook that leads me off in a certain direction where I should be going. So that's how I envisioned mine anyway. Fourth circle, the scout gets a +1 mystic defense, which is always useful.
The scout gets their primary and physical, their secondary and mystic, because the things that they are typically going to be encountering, again, looking at the more wilderness-oriented thing, is either avoiding creatures, and the creature powers, if they aren't targeting physical defense, will quite often target mystic defense. And so that's kind of why that choice is made. They do get bonuses to social defense in their higher circles, but that's something that just, again, the primary discipline talents and the things that all scouts get do tend to lean a little bit more towards wilderness, partly because that's what most people will conceive of when they're thinking of that type of character.
Agreed. And there's a whole lot more wilderness in Bar Save than there are cities.
Yes, so. That is true.
Just going by straight territory. But fourth circle, the discipline talent is Danger Sense, which has come in handy for me. Yes.
Yes. This is the avoid ambushes. This is the notice a trap. This is, again, playing into the idea that I mentioned earlier with the karma on initiative, the ability to react, to have that spidey sense, as you have put it in past times we've discussed this, that ability to notice problems almost instinctually without necessarily, and your body reacting to something that it has noticed without necessarily you needing to make a conscious decision to do so.
Yes. So lovely. All of those at second, third, and fourth circles. So Stealthy Stride, Mystic Pursuit, Danger Sense, all absolutely right up the Scout's alley. There is nothing to argue with. So let's get to the options because these are fun.
Yeah, and as with all other disciplines, the options are where you start to define a little bit more your character's style and focus with what you're going to do with them.
Yeah. Anticipate Blow.
A number of because as you may have noticed, none of the discipline talents that you get in the first 4 circles of Scout have any kind of traditional combat applicability to them. Danger Sense is sort of the closest one to it, and that's just the ability to not be surprised if you get caught off guard in combat. But it doesn't really help you hit your opponent. So we do tend to see more combat talents in their options than we do in others. Anticipate Blow is a great defensive talent. It pairs very well with the Scout's high perception, which allows them to not only increase their defense against people who might be attacking them, but also to turn that against them. It works nicely with the fact that they have a karma point on initiative tests, which means that except against disciplines like the warrior who might be kicking in, their high initiative boosting talents to go first, you're likely to end up in a situation where you can use that to your advantage to basically sort of know where the attacks are going to be coming from and to turn that around.
Absolutely. Totally in the wheelhouse. Avoid Blow, because it's just super useful.
Avoid Blow is a great talent. Almost everybody gets it at some point fairly early on, either as a discipline talent or an option. It is the workhorse of the defensive.
Yes.
The defensive situation.
Use it.
This is the dodge or parry. This is the I'm going to get hit unless I do something. This is that something.
So why would you not have it? Anyway, Creature Analysis.
Creature Analysis plays very nicely into the perception and wilderness themes of the Scout. They don't get it as a discipline talent, mainly because there isn't room for it, but it is something that is absolutely right in their wheelhouse. If you don't have a Beastmaster in your group, if you want to have somebody who's going to be able to look at maybe strange creatures that are coming out of tainted or corrupted places and find out unusual things about them, their weaknesses, their behaviors and whatnot. Creature Analysis is what you'd be looking at. Is it better to go after them with physical attacks, or are they more susceptible to magic?
Yeah, I didn't take Creature Analysis because I do have a Beastmaster in my group. Disarm Trap.
Disarm Trap is where you start picking up some more of the Scout, or some of more of the thief aspects of things that Scout kind of strays into a little bit. If you are going to be a Scout in an adventuring group and you're going to be doing some care delving, or perhaps if you're going to be an urban Scout and infiltrating or being a spy or something like that, having Disarm Trap, the ability to bypass security features and things like that, can be very handy.
I've used it. I took that one. Great Leap.
It's a good movement talent. Sometimes you're going to need to just jump over that gap, that crevasse, that gap. Being able to have that enhanced movement can come in very handy. If you need to, you're leading a group up a mountainside and you get to kind of a sheer cliff face and you don't have any options otherwise, you just jump up to the ledge and hammer in your stake and drop the rope down. So it does allow certain bit of flexibility of movement.
And better to have as a talent than a skill, I will say that.
In terms of the effect, yes.
In terms of the effect of Great Leap, yes. Lockpicking.
Lockpicking, again, talking about the Scout as potentially a thief. If you are going the more urban spy route, having lockpicking the ability to be able to get into places or things that you that are being protected can come in handy. Yes,
absolutely. So we've got 2 weapon. Finally, we get to 2 weapon possibilities, melee weapons and missile weapons.
Again, since the Scout doesn't have any discipline talents that are their actual, like your basic combat abilities, generally speaking, most people who are going to be a Scout would probably pick one or the other just because of the limits of the number of options that you have. Yeah. It is not in 4th edition a downside that these are options because you can spend karma on everything. You are not hindered in that regard in terms of your chosen combat style. But basically it's, are you going to go melee weapons and sort of be a support close combat type? Or are you going to go with the missile weapons and be more of an archer ranged type character? Both are equally valid. you end up kind of diluting your option choices over your overall path if you decide to go with both, because you end up with not as many options to take advantage of that. But if you are going to be going with a more combat type, which is certainly something you may want to consider if you've got a smaller group and you don't have as many combat characters, to be able to pick up both the melee weapons and missile weapons and have those options available in terms of what you would want to do.
Read and write language, and then speak language. We're just going to combine those and talk about them both.
Yeah, both of those kind of play into more of the, not social aspect so much, but the scout dealing with civilization. Speak language, if you're going to be traveling around a lot and possibly ending up in places where the dialect may have shifted or they might not speak Throlic and so forth, having the ability to speak to people that you encounter can come in very handy. Read and write language is probably less important overall, but if you're, again, going to be more of a spy type or urban scout, having the ability to look through the documents on the target's desk, which are written in Theron, and figure out which ones of them are actually important, can come in handy as well.
Yeah, that's more for your infiltration type scout. So, cool. On to Fifth Circle, which I have not gotten to yet, but it's coming up soon. Enhanced Senses is the ability. They got a Karma thing, and of course they get Discipline talent. So, the Enhanced Senses for the Scout, for a point of strain, the Scout enhances one of his natural senses as a simple action and gains a +2 bonus to perception tests based on the sense for a round. If that sense is unhindered, you may ignore blindness penalties as well for your primary sense.
If you're in the dark, but you decide to boost your hearing, you can kind of basically overcome the penalty that would normally apply, say, to shooting an arrow at someone. If you can detect them successfully, that's part of what this is intended to do, is to allow the scout with their awareness of the environment to get around penalties that would apply to people who are relying on sight by relying on other things. Yeah.
So kind of like a little help to blind fighting as well. Very cool. The karma ability that they get at Fifth Circle, because everyone gets a lot of things at Fifth Circle, is they can now spend a point of karma on recovery tests.
There's not a whole lot of theme with the scout, not a lot of talents and so forth that they get that really enhance their survivability and recover rate in the sense of having talents that heal them and whatnot. But the ability to spend karma on recovery is something that shows up in a number of disciplines, and this just makes it a little bit easier for them to recover from injury, which is something that would make sense, especially if you've got someone who's going to be out in the wilderness and potentially dealing with the circumstances that can come about as a result of that.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for it because I was in a very small party and I needed this because I was getting hit a lot. My employee blow didn't roll as well as I wanted it to. Anyway, the discipline talent they get is evidence analysis, which again, right up the wheelhouse for the scout to notice things and decipher the meaning behind a scene that they encounter.
Yes. Sometimes referred to as the Sherlock Holmes talent.
We always called it CSI bar save.
Or the CSI bar save. The ability to look at a scene and figure out what happened and to get a sense of it. This applies not only to traditional, we came across the guy was murdered and what happened, but the scene in The Princess Bride after they've had their duel and Prince Humperdinck is up at the top of at the cliffs where he's going back and forth. There was a great that's evidence analysis. That's looking at the scene and figuring out what's going on. Plays in very nicely with tracking and awareness and other things that allow the scout to just take in a scene and know what had happened and what's going on.
Absolutely. So, and any more references we can do The Princess Bride, we will keep throwing them at you.
Well, absolutely.
There's a shortage of perfect movies in the world. At Sixth Circle, the scout gets a plus to his physical defense again, now at a +2 total, because they got to have that. And the discipline talent is Astral Sight, which I as well can't wait to get to.
Yeah, expanding their perceptive abilities. The scout now is able to look at things in the astral realm and gain additional information and insight based on that. This is less the sort of thing that you end up seeing with, say, nethermancers and wizards who are looking at magical patterns and so forth, but more just an expansion of the scout's perceptive field and being able to get even more information for them to understand what's going on. perhaps the most important thing for the scout is the ability to detect and understand what the relative corruption level of an area is, and to potentially forewarn of danger that might come about as a result of that.
Thanks for the pointer. I'll be using that when I get to this talent. So 7th circle, they finally get a +1 to their initiative.
So they get karma on initiative at 3rd. Now they get an additional bonus to their initiative. So again, increasing that ability for them to react or to move to act before their opponents in combat or in any other kind of situation where reaction time would matter.
And the discipline talent, 7th circle, is Safe Path.
Safe Path is a great talent. Basically, at this point, the scout has the ability to magically contact spirits of the area and have the spirits communicate to them the best way to go. This allows them to avoid threats that they might not even be aware of themselves and things like that. And so it's, again, continuing that enhancement of the scout's connection with the area that they're traveling in and their ability to magically get around.
Because it's not just the trees, the dirt, the air, and the water. It's the spirits that inhabit that, going back to Dakota's lovely essay and the story of the Spy and the Wolf. It's, you are in communication with everything about that area, and that includes the spirits that inhabit it. So I love the fact that Safe Path is there. It's been awesome, I think, in every iteration of the game, in every edition. So 8th circle, the scout finally gets a +3 total to their physical defense. So yay. And the discipline talent of Orbiting Spy, which I think is a nice little nuance to the scout.
This is a talent that allows the scout to summon a small spirit that goes up and hovers overhead, flying around in a small area, but basically increases the scout's ability to notice and sense things. It acts as an additional perception or awareness test that can be made while they are traveling and have it active. It can also see astrally. So it's just basically yet another extension of the scout's ability to see and notice and be aware of their environment.
And that's one that actually overlaps with the Nethermancer, because nobody else gets Orbiting Spy.
Yeah, the Nethermancer gets it at 7th circle.
Yep.
More for the spirit summoning aspect, although it does the same thing. The Nethermancer gets it more because of the spirit connection as opposed to the awareness connection.
All very cool, and I love that the Astral Sight, Safe Path, and the Orbiting Spy are nice little wrinkles to have for the scout, really fleshing out their abilities and what they can actually do. So on to the options, which again will kind of inform how you play your character specifically. Animal Bond.
Animal Bond, the scout plays a little bit, as I mentioned, in the same territory as the Beastmaster when it comes to wild places and survival therein. They don't get the full capability of magically boosting animal companions and so forth, but scouts absolutely would have, some scouts would absolutely have that kind of ability to bond or work with animals, whether they are, their chosen horse, their chosen mount, or whatever it might be, other animals that they could bond and make animal companions. You can pick up animal training as a skill if you really wanted to continue to enhance
Flesh
them.
that out.
I like kind of poking fun at Drizzt Do'Urden from Forgotten Realms, but he's a ranger and he has an animal companion. It's magical, but he has that and they work closely together. So that is absolutely something that is on brand for a scout to be able to do.
Absolutely. I agree. Borrow Sense.
Borrow Sense. This plays nicely with Animal Bond, though it's not strictly required to have that in order to take advantage of Borrow Sense. This is yet another way that the scout could expand their perceptive abilities by borrowing to enhance even further, borrowing the senses of animals in the area in order to gain bonuses to their awareness checks or to gain senses that they don't otherwise have access to, like, say, a bat's echolocation or, anything along those lines.
And this is not a bad idea to carry around an animal you've bonded with, like a mouse, send it down a tunnel and see what it sees, or something.
Well, Borrow Sense doesn't work that way.
Oh, okay.
Borrow Sense does not allow you to see through the eyes of another creature.
Oh,
what
sorry.
it does is you basically take, like, you could have like the mouse and take its hearing to gain an enhancement to your own hearing. but that you are still limited to what you as an individual can perceive. There might be a knack that allows the sort of occupation.
I think I'm thinking of I believe I'm thinking of a first edition spell where you could borrow a sense for a creature in the area.
Well, there's also like animal possession, I think.
My thought process was off. No big. Conceal object.
If you're going with a more infiltrator spy type, overlapping with the thief territory, having the ability to hide daggers or any other kind of object on your person that you don't want to be found, documents that might allow you to get into a place that you aren't supposed to be or things like that, but you don't want them to be found until you produce them. It can be very handy to have that in your arsenal.
Cool. Love it. Disguise self, which I think also adds to that spy and thief capability.
Absolutely. The thief and illusionist kind of both get access to this. It allows the scout to appear as someone other than themselves. Again, if you're looking for the infiltrator or spy type, can be very handy getting into places or getting out of places that you need to.
Absolutely. One that I am looking forward to having is Spirit Mount.
Spirit Mount's a fun talent. The scout, I don't know that I'm going to get it on Virag because Nethermancers also get access to it. But Spirit Mount is cool. It basically, if a scout needs to cross territory quickly, more suited to a wilderness type scout who might not have the ability in a certain circumstance to have a traditional horse or other mount, being able to call one up when you need it to be able to travel more quickly for a little bit can be very handy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, since I'm playing it to Scrang, I'm looking forward to figuring out what the Spirit Mount is going to look like, just because it'll be fun. Spot Armor Flaw, which I think is also very cool.
Yep, this is one of the sort of combat enhancing talents. It works equally well with either melee or missile attacks. It allows you to basically increase the damage that you can deal with your attacks. The scout does not get access, at least in their first 8 circles, to any of the traditional damage adders
boosting,
like Crushing Blow or anything like that. This is sort of the closest thing to it. Again, if you're going to be going with a little bit more of a combat-oriented build, is definitely one that you want to look at because it is based on perception.
I'm going to snag that one. And then Sprint. Again, we need to move somewhere very quickly.
Yeah, we talked about Great Leap being a really useful movement-enhancing talent option for those that need it. Sprint does a very similar thing in terms of it increasing your movement rate, which pairs nicely with Great Leap, but also just in general to be able to cover longer distances more quickly.
Absolutely.
Within a certain framework.
Surprise Strike. The other damage boosting.
Damage, yeah, this is the other damage booster. Again, works equally well with either close combat or ranged attacks. It is a little bit more suited to the build where you might be going with an infiltrator or spy type, although you do have Stealthy Stride as a discipline talent, so it's not strictly required in that sense. But any kind of situation where you can either get the drop on someone, or if you've got companions who are going to be drawing the primary attack so that you can get blindside bonuses, or warriors or air sailors or whatever using distract, any kind of situation. So Surprise Strike it's a great damage adder, but it is situational in terms of whether it would be appropriate for your character progression based on not only your character's personality and the way that you're going, but the rest of your group and whether you are going to be seeing yourself in situations where that can come in handy. I would say probably that in most circumstances, you're either going to want to pick, if you're looking at a damage adder, you're going to want to pick probably either Spot Armor Flaw or Surprise Strike. You probably don't need to pick up both, although you certainly could. Spot Armor Flaw is the one that's going to be, it doesn't tend to be quite as high a damage as you get from Surprise Strike, but it is more broadly useful.
I was thinking the same thing. Tiger Spring, the only initiative booster they get.
Yeah, there's your initiative booster. If you are finding that your karma on initiative and your initiative step bonus at 7th circle are not enough, Tiger Spring you can throw in there to get even more speed.
Yeah, totally. If you need to go first. I don't need to, so I don't really mind. And then True Sight, which I think they share with illusionists.
Yeah, well, True Sight allows the scout, again, it's an enhancement of their perceptive ability. They get so good at noticing things, they get bonuses to detecting when things are illusions.
Mm-hmm.
it can be incredibly useful in that regard.
Yes.
And so if you're going to be stacking up those perceptive enhancement, like noticing things abilities, True Sight, Borrow Sense, stuff like that all play into that theme very nicely.
Totally. Yeah, I'm looking forward to all the perceptive abilities my scout will encounter because I'm going to need them all. So we brought up a couple of other pop culture references, a few. Do we have any more we can probably throw at anybody?
I'm sure we've got people listening that are screaming them at us that we're not mentioning.
Only one I could think of otherwise on the fly was the recon platoon from Heartbreak Ridge. That was pretty much it. Because that's reconnaissance. That's your job. Go in, see what's going on, get the information out, maybe fight a little bit, and go back and tell the heavier forces what's going on. So that's the only way I could otherwise think of modern day, since we've been, I can't say chastised, but corrected to think of things not just in fantasy, with Doc Holliday being a sword master in his in his
another place to, you brought up the Lakota and the stuff there at the beginning. There is a lot that you could take, and a lot of sort of pop culture references, as cringy as some of them might be now, looking back at the westerns of the 50s and 60s and whatnot, and the portrayal not only of native scouts and so forth, but also cowboys and whatnot would also have traits that would be very in line and appropriate for a scout approach.
Yeah, I have always thought that anything to do with any of the Native American tribes always lent itself well to anything to do with a scout, because they have always been more in tune with nature than a lot of cultures. So I loved finding Dakota Wind's little short story here on the Spy and the Wolf, because I think it lends itself wonderfully to our discussion tonight. Coincidentally found it while trying to find something else, stayed with it. I'm going to go with that. So I think if you watch, any movie with Native Americans, Dances with Wolves, Geronimo, most of those will give you some aspect of play where you can bring a scout into that and kind of use that for your character. I certainly am going to be using this.
Sure. The scout can be a really good, almost jack of all trades type of character to bring into a group. Because, like I mentioned earlier, they don't necessarily get all of the tricks that a full archer would, but they get a lot of the perceptive abilities and can have the missile weapons. They don't get all of the kind of cool combat flashiness of a swordmaster, but they can fight and kind of get a little bit of an edge with their perceptive abilities, perhaps with spot armor flaw or surprise strike, right?
Yeah.
They share a lot of similar wilderness survival and wild places stuff that goes along with the Beastmaster, and so can be tuned very nicely to fill in gaps in the group that might be a little bit short depending on what the other members of the party might be. And the scout kind of...
And they have an overlap a lot with the thief abilities, but they don't have all of them to sneak in anywhere, but they have just enough to be effective in what they do to get in and get out, but not, steal the king's crown or anything like that. So there's a lot of overlap with a lot of other... The scout is the universal Venn diagram.
Sure. Yeah. They've got a lot of overlap with a lot of places. And this is something that the scout was one of, along with the air sailor, was introduced not in the core book of first edition, but in the companion as an example of something that could be made with the discipline creation rules that were in the companion, but very quickly became something. It got an essay in the Adept's way and sort of very quickly became one of the core 15, because it was filling in a spot that was not really covered in the same way by either the Beastmaster, which kind of dealt with the wilderness survival stuff, or the Thief, which especially in first edition was a lot more focused on the traditional D&D style thief of, find traps, open locks, like that kind of thing.
Backstab.
Yeah, it basically filled in it kind of slotted into that ranger archetype that was not truly present in first edition. And in some ways it might be felt a little bit less of a weaker cousin to any of those things in their area of focus, but brings some other strengths to the table that those don't.
I agree. It's I'm looking forward to making my scout into the jack of all trades because my party has collapsed and expanded a number of times. And so depending upon who is able to show up due to COVID nation, then I've got a talent or two that can fit in for what they are not here to present. And so I can do all that. So I liked the scout for the jack of all trades, but I really liked the scout for all of the perceptive abilities because they get to notice stuff, see stuff, and describe stuff to everybody else to go, okay, my job is to go find it. Your job is to point me in the direction. Because I'm partnered up with
the one thing that the scout doesn't get in their first 8 circles is any real kind of social talent stuff. Like they don't even get first impression. No. The scout generally is presented as they work well with a group in that their abilities can kind of fill in and support what an adventuring party might be doing, but they are equally at home in being a solo character and kind of wandering the wilds and whatnot, and don't really have a lot of those social talents, even a smattering of them like some disciplines get. And so one of the things that you might want to look at with the scout is possibly if you are looking perhaps to, like, the scout is not going to do much to shore up weaknesses, social weaknesses in a group, but maybe because they get so much that is covered by their half magic and other things, there are a number of things that are commonly taken as skills by adventurers, like climbing and things like that the scout gets pretty good access to. And so maybe looking at picking up a social talent or a social ability or two under skills to fill that in if it's something that is necessary in your group. But that's the one place really that, at least in the first 8 circles, the scout falls short on, is any real kind of social capability.
Much to my game master's dismay, our beginning group was a Orc Beastmaster, a Troll Archer, and a Tiskrang Scout. Me. We had to interact with a lot of people. We had to interact with a lot of people, and he's like, "You didn't interrogate anybody. You didn't ask anybody questions." I'm kind of like, "Do you see any social talents on my build?"
Yeah, I mean, the Beastmaster generally will have a decent charisma.
Yeah,
and so is able to kind of go through basic interaction tests with that. But yeah, they don't get any talents that can enhance their natural charisma ability. Archers, as we discussed way back at the beginning, aren't great social characters generally either. They can be, but it's not something that comes to mind with them. And the scout doesn't, as we've just gone through their progression, they don't get anything in their first 8 circles that supports it.
So we were all role playing appropriately. We just weren't asking anybody any questions because that's not what we do. So. Yeah, we were failing a little bit on information gathering. I think was our blind spot. Anyway, we're getting better, but that's just us. So
the scout is a really great discipline, as I mentioned, to fill in gaps. If you are a type of player who doesn't want to necessarily be at the front of things, but wants to support or help out your group, there are places and areas where you will absolutely shine. Having a scout in the group, if you are going to have any kind of extensive wilderness or exploration type of stuff, whether care delving or anything like that, if the game isn't going to need a full-blown thief, having a scout can be a good substitute, for those sorts of situations. Yeah, scouts are great. I don't think I've ever played one. You just kind of need to make some decisions based on how you see them and what the rest of the group is in terms of maybe what your progression is going to be to either fill in gaps or help support the goals of the group in the overall progression of your game.
I struggled to write out what my thoughts were for my character, but I finally got it all down, like I said, in less than 1,000 words, as to what their role is, where they came to be in that role, and what they see in that role. And so I'm good on playing my character now. I've got a complete definition finally figured out, which is one of the second time in my entire playing history for all 5 of my Earthdawn characters. So I've got them down. I'm good now. And I love being the jack of all trades, and I think it's going to be a wild ride. I had never played a scout until 4th edition, and I'm digging this talent progression. I'm going to enjoy it to its fullest. So we've blathered on for the last 8 minutes after we're done with the scout talking about my guy. Anyway, so any final thoughts on the scout other than, yes, scouts are great. I'm digging mine.
Scouts are great. No, I've kind of covered all of that. We've mentioned the pop culture references. We mentioned sort of the strengths and shortcomings of the scout as a discipline and what you might want to do or expect when you are playing one. And so we will leave it at that. If you have any questions about the Scout or stories you want to share or anything like that, feel free to email them to us, edsgpodcast@gmail.com.
There you go.
As usual, you can find both Dan and myself in the various social media arenas, the official Twitter feed for the podcast, as well as our own personal things, Facet Games Discord, Facet Games forums, the Facebook Earthdawn Guild, and various other places like that. Like, share, and subscribe, etc., etc.
So until next time, folks, which is in a week or so, it is time for you to go scout out your own legend.
Good night, everybody.